Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're calling from. Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Elliott, as always, and welcome to session 2 of the SOW Modern Change Lifecycle Launch and Learn. Today, we're going to be focusing on success scores, and because we're really pressed for time in the last session, I'm going to hurry up and just pass this off to Greg and Isaac, and they're going to take care of you today.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, thanks everyone for carving time out of your busy schedules to join these sessions and really learn about some of the new features that we're delivering in the next generation change product. I know everybody's busy, so thank you. And it's really cool to see this many people excited about change management. So as Chris pointed out last time, there's a safe harbor, which I know all of you have seen. I'm thinking in this deck, there is nothing forward-looking, but we will be talking about the capabilities and kind of how to get up and running with Change Success Score, actually success scores in general, not just Change Success Scores. So for those of you that are following along the journey of the whole Launch and Learn series with change management, we're super excited to have you in these and the opportunity to talk to you about some of the cool capabilities we've been working on. So where we are today is session 2. We did modern change on May 24th, and I think Chris posted the recording. And today we're going to be covering change success score, change model success, and we'll bleed over just a little bit into some of the risk capabilities as a setup for the June 21st discussion. All right. Oh, sorry about that. I clicked the wrong link there. So for those of you that were in the first session, I'll be really brief about this, but we talked about really the journey of change evolution, looking back, clear back to in the 1980s and 80s and 90s when we saw ITIL version 1 start to emerge. And as a result, we saw change control boards get stood up, and they were very much designed to really stop the hemorrhaging of change-related incidents in the enterprise. And what we saw as change managers put in a kind of a precarious role where they had to really act as that final safeguard for production. But as we evolved through both the ITIL worlds and change management in general, we saw more of a change management practice. This really did well for a lot of organizations and enterprises around the world, just having that best practice foundation from ITIL. The problem with it, though, was very much around that ITIL really didn't address anything other than the operational side of the business. So it left a fairly large gap there. And I think we've all heard this story from change managers over the years of particularly reflecting back around, if it doesn't fit in the ITIL process, you need to change the way you work so that it does fit in that. Where we are today in the kind of 2020 plus timeframe is we're seeing customers move to more of a change enablement model where it's really about partnering to ensure your change requests are automated, safe, and delivered without delay. So the goal is really to use data-driven automation to increase change velocity. So when we start talking about success scores, when we first started working on this about 2 years ago or so, it was really exciting. We were talking about, change gamification and all the cool things we could do to really make change management more exciting. But more importantly, we wanted to look at how can we leverage some of that data about how well teams are doing or how well an organization is doing with change management. So is it really change gamification? I think you could argue that, or I would argue that it's change enablement chess. And the reason I say that is we're very much, if you remember, we're trying to get to this place and help get customers in this place where it really is a data-driven approach to change that drives high velocity change into the organization while minimizing those change-related incidents while also maintaining governance in the organization. So I think of this very much like a change enablement chess game. So let's talk a little bit about success scores and what we've done here. The first one is change success score. We delivered this back in Paris, I believe, and it really is, think of it like a FICO score for your change teams that gives you a representation, if you will, a numerical expression of that group's change success history in terms of where they're targeting changes. So it can be used to evaluate the likelihood of future success and help determine the level of change rigor required. And it also brings a little bit of fun into the change management organization. But what's really cool about Change Success Score is we very intentionally built this in a way that customers could extend it and modify it and make it fit for purpose in their organization. In fact, if you look across the portfolio of change capabilities that we've delivered over the last couple of years, we very much tried to bring it down to the change manager, the administration pieces of this, but also really drive the ability to be extensible in these things and tailor your change process or life cycles to the needs of the organization. So with this, you can actually change these bands of what's high, medium, and low. You can modify these success metric multipliers. They're used in PA formula indicators on the back end, and you can add your own indicators in here as well. And when Isaac does the demo in just a few minutes, he's going to show you that by clicking on this view change history details, you get basically a view into a leaderboard. Well, first off, additional analytics around that group, but you also get kind of this leaderboard concept of being able to see how well the teams are performing across your entire enterprise ecosystem. What we found after that was there was an opportunity for us to add change model success. And what this is it really looks at how good or bad an organization is at delivering these change types or models. We've always had this with standard changes where we rendered the success rate of those standard changes, but now we're rendering that success rate on all the cards so that you can get a good view of exactly how you're doing with those types and models. And I'm purposely saying types and models here because even though we're calling it change model success, we support both types and models in this scenario. So you can get success rates on types and models depending on how you're rendering the cards. So what we did is we took the combination of these two and rolled them up into a brand new module called success probability. And we're not going to dive too much into that today because we're going to be covering it in the next session when we talk about next generation risk. But I do want to call out the distinction here just to make sure we're all on the same page about what this is and isn't. So change success score is very much a representation of the team's success, regardless of what change types or models they're using. And then if you look on the right-hand side over here with change model success, we're really looking at how good or bad is the organization at delivering these types of changes into the target environment, regardless of what team does it. So when you start to bring these two elements together, you get a much more succinct view of exactly what the success probability is of a particular change that's coming into the target environment. So let's talk a little bit about how this feeds into risk, because this is really an important element. And it's important to note that, like I mentioned in one of the first slides, is change gamification is one piece of it, but it's really about capturing that data and leveraging it to drive things like to act as an input for risk or to evaluate approval policies. So with the legacy risk scoring that we had in change management prior to Tokyo, it was basically based on a single condition builder. We rolled both risk and impact up into that condition builder, which added a little bit of complexity for a lot of customers trying to make the distinction between risk and impact. We never really evaluated success probability, and we would triangulate those risk scores and derive the highest risk value. And then there was pretty much, or not pretty much, for a lot of organizations, there was a pretty big dependency on those legacy risk assessments. And I think most of you know at this point, those risk assessments are very subjective in nature. And where we're trying to bring customers to with change enablement is really to get more of a data-driven approach where we can remove some of that subjectivity from the approval process and the evaluation of risk. So with modern risk scoring, we took a look at, what does the industry look at when we talk about risk, not just IT, but just across the entire industry. And it's really based on impact and probability. So what we wanted to do with this particular capability was to drive those same tenets back into what we were building from a risk perspective. So within this success probability module, you can evaluate risk at individual team levels or group levels, and you can use different parameters to profile that risk. So for example, you can use team success probability, which is your change success score, or you can use change model success, which is basically how good or bad are we as an organization at delivering these changes into the target environment. Or you can use a combination of the two to basically come up with a value. And what we did here is we basically ingest the current impact value directly from risk conditions, and then we pull in the success probability data based on how the customer has configured it. And I'm kind of trying to emphasize that message because, as many of you know, we're driving towards this model where customers have the ability to do federated change, meaning I can evaluate risk differently for my DevOps team versus my SRE team versus my infrastructure teams if I choose to do so. And the reality of it is those changes can be slightly different, and you may want to evaluate risk differently. But the important part of this is really this, the way we're doing this. If you think about the way incident has behaved almost from the beginning, they never set the priority of an incident. They always evaluate the urgency and impact, derive risk, priority. In change, we're doing something, we've adopted a very similar approach where we ingest probability, we ingest impact, and then we derive the risk value based on that. So we're creating an output for that. And then we've got another capability that we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks, which is risk intelligence. So this is an ML capability that's available for all ITSM Pro customers. And it's an incredibly powerful capability. If you have not looked at this, I would highly encourage you to take a peek at it, because what we saw in our data in the lab environments was that we had enormous success or precision with this particular capability, meaning that we were seeing results in the 90+% range in terms of accurately assessing risk using ML. And then a lot of you customers have already adopted or are using risk assessment. I think last time we took a look at the numbers, there was about 5,000 customers that were still using risk assessment. We are making a recommendation that customers start to kind of think about more of a data-driven model towards evaluating risk, and start to move away from kind of using risk assessment as that primary mechanism to identify the risk of a change. What we'd like to do with this in the future is basically be able to hang actions off of it. So think about, like, you know, based on how I answered these questions, I'm going to make a firewall change. Okay, you need a security review. But at the end of the day, what we're doing with this is we basically bring it into risk scoring, and then we always derive the highest risk value. So again, I wanted to kind of paint the picture of these success scores and how we're ingesting them so that you can use them in risk. And there's one other very important use case that I want to call out, and Isaac is going to show it to you in the next few minutes. But a lot of customers also use the success scores to work with approval policies as well. So if I have a score above 700 and I'm very good at it, I may want to auto approve low risk changes. If I've got the exact same change and that team is not so good at delivering changes into production, I may want to tag approvals onto it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to use the underlying data structures and past history of changes to come up with an outcome that makes sense for the organization. So with that, Isaac, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can do a live demo.
All right. Thank you, Greg. All right, so success scores. What I want to show first is actually another way that we can consume the data of these success scores, and that's going to be underneath here under the change approval policies. So you'll see change approval policies referenced quite a bit throughout these sessions. This is, make sure that I clicked it right. Okay. So change approval policies are going to reference a flow, and inside the change approval policies is where you set the parameters of what you want to happen to that flow and the change ticket. So opening up our normal change approval policy, I can see a couple of policy inputs first referenced. These policy inputs are critical in deciding the direction that the change ticket will go. So things like, were there any recent outages? And how long ago were those outages in place? Are there any incidents open on the CIs that are connected? Things along those lines. So these policy inputs are also available to get them third party, and we can pull in information. You'll see in a future session how we add policy inputs from external systems as well to help ServiceNow make decisions. These decisions are a collection of those policy inputs, and we're going to look at these first two. So this change ticket could be a low risk and considered for auto approval. The next one we're going to look at is low risk, but something will be a little different and it won't be auto approved. So the low risk auto approval has these conditions underneath it, pretty straightforward. So we have to have the state at assess. The change risk needs to be low, no outages, and then the change success score metric is what we're going to focus on for the demo. Has to be greater than or equal to 700. So that FICO score of the performance of the team plays a role in how you decide the way to handle these change tickets. So that's for auto approval. Let's take a look at peer approval. And there's one difference, which is the change success score metric is less than or equal to 699. So that's our threshold and allowing certain teams to have auto approvals or not. So let's see that in action. I'm going to go ahead and just create a new change request. It'll be normal because that's the approval policy we had been looking at. And I'll just set up some functions here. So it's going to be a low risk. So it's change in documentation and put that in there. We will change the state to assess. So we do want it to be moving to that first group. And then what I'm going to do here is pick a team, and this is going to be the technical services. All right, so the assignment group is technical services. You can see everything on this screen. We'll go ahead and just save that. Bare minimum required here. So we're expecting it to be at assess, but look at that. It's actually gone forward past that.
Isaac, sorry to interrupt, but do you mind showing them the change success score modal here?
Yeah, that absolutely was going to do that. Yep. So the reason we see that is the scorecard associated with that team. So there's that connection back to the approval policy and what decision will be made. This one here is an excellent representation of performance in this organization. So even though a score of 699 would still be high, we've set our threshold here to be over 700. This certainly meets that at 806. We push that forward through past that first level of auto approval. So we'll click on success score analytics. I can now see how this team is performing in the breakout of what's going on here. So over the last 30 days, as you scroll through, these are the number of changes, successful with issues. But that gamification can really kick in and not only help your company identify opportunities for improvement, but if I go ahead and just clear that filter, this is now my company score, not just for that one particular group. And now we've got a leaderboard here. So we do see technical services support has the highest, and they are at the top. And the other team scores flow down and aggregate together for the overall company score. Anything else at this point, Greg, that you wanted me to point out?
No, it looks good.
I'd just like to point out there are a number of questions pouring in the chat. Not sure if you guys want to try to address some of those as you're running through the demo, or maybe look at them afterwards.
So Chris, thanks for calling that out. A few of our engineers that were working on this originally are on the call with us today as well. So they'll be responding to some of those questions in the chat as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. So we want to take a look at that functionality in Service Operations Workspace, right? So how does that look and feel inside the new UI of ServiceNow? So we've got multiple tickets that I can look at here in the assess stage. We'll go ahead and just create a new ticket for ourselves underneath the normal category. So very similar to what we did here.
So for why Isaac is doing this, what he switched UIs here for those of you that have not seen the new service operations workspace, which is kind of our reimagined change experience that was released in February. It's very much rolled up around jobs to be done based on the underlying state model. So that's why the difference in the UI right here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so just going to get in enough information here. And at this point, we've got the description and an assignment underneath a technical services support organization. So we're going to go ahead and calculate that risk. Go ahead and move this through. We can see another representation of that scorecard coming through, but also showing us that the risk is low, probability of success is high, the impact is also low. And that change success score is part of that calculation. So this team, not the individual, but the team has an excellent rate of that change success. So we've got a 90% score there. So I'm going to just show, well, this is going to actually stay across all of the stages as we work through it here. So even though this ticket has already been created, I'm going to reassign this. Keep an eye on this this risk calculation. So when I reassign it, it's still going to be to Beth Englund, but at this point here, we'll switch over to a different team that she is a part of, which is the ITSM engineering group. Go ahead and save that. And just on the fly, you noticed we did see the change success score. We still have a high probability of success. That's because this is for some documentation change, but the change success score will be put into that calculation and it stays in place all throughout the states of that change ticket. All right, that is what I had there, Greg.
Yeah, so can I just make a couple comments here, Isaac?
Sure,
so
sure.
Before you stop sharing your screen, if you can leave it up there. So one thing that's important to know is when you're in SOW, it's important to run this recalculate risk action that you see over on the contextual sidebar there once you've changed the assignment group, because what it's going to do is reevaluate risk at that point. So even though Isaac showed you that simply changing the assignment group will change the change success score, we actually have to recalculate the risk, and he just did it there. And now that risk is moderate. So why am I talking about this? The reason being is we're using the exact same change. And what we've done is basically just assigned it to a different group, and the risk has moved from low to moderate as a result of that. So you can see the power of leveraging these success scores to evaluate risk. And if you haven't taken a look at the new service operations workspace, we would love to have some customers jump on there and take a peek at it. You can get it on the store. It's really powerful, and it's really going to change the way customers do change management for years to come. And it simplifies that experience for your users. Anything else from you, Isaac, or do you want me to take over?
All yours, Greg.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about a little bit more in detail about what's happening here. And I promised Chris at the beginning of this that I would keep the presentation part of this somewhat succinct so that we could answer as many questions and address things that you guys need to know from us. So I'll try and go through this pretty quickly. The data collection, we're looking at total changes, successful changes, unsuccessful changes. And keep in mind when you're looking at these things, I think most of you that work in change management a lot will recognize that some of these are based off the close codes in the change and the incidents caused by change. So that's the data collection we're doing. Then we bring that information in and we do these, there's success multipliers in the formula indicators inside PA. And basically you can say things like, I think out of box, we ship it with, if you have a successful change with issues, I think you get maybe 1 point, or it might even be a negative. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how we set up those multipliers, but you as a customer can go in there and adjust those multipliers so that they make sense for your organization. We took a pretty good pass at this to try and think about what customers would need and what multipliers we would apply. So I think we hit like 80% of it. But for you customers that want to adjust these and make them more tailored to your organization, you can certainly do that. So let's talk about activation and how this works a little bit. So first off, for plugin activation, you can go and activate the Change Success Score plugin. And even though that says Change Success Score, we're actually, the second plugin gets loaded automatically, this Change Success Score Foundation. But we also incorporated Change Model Success into this single plugin. So by loading this first plugin, you're bringing in Change Success Score and Change Model Success. And then we also added this success probability module. So if you want to use the advanced risk capabilities that we're going to be talking about in the next session, you'll want to load this plugin as well. In terms of access restrictions, I know one of the questions on the last session that we did was help us understand which of these are pro features, which of these are standard. For success scores, these are very much pro features, in part because they're using PA on the back end. But the access restrictions are really around, based on the customer's PA configuration. And for the success scorecard that Isaac showed you, it's really the ability to read the assignment group. And then the dashboards, the roles you'll need are ITIL and SN Change Read. And how it works, let me see if I can clear my screen a little bit here. So when you load the plugin, the PA jobs get added to collect the success score data. And by default, I think we have them set up to run at 2 a.m. UTC, and you can basically adjust those as needed or configure them to make sure they align with your environment. But one thing I want to call out here is that, as we mentioned above in the previous slide, we're really collecting that information based on close codes in your change request and changes with an actual end date of the previous day. So we're looking at the previous day's data and what the success or the close code was in that change request. And then were there any change related incidents associated with that particular change? Once that job is complete, there's an event that gets fired that triggers additional processing. So this additional processing uses a PA formula to calculate the adjustment needed to each of the group's success scores based on the data collected from the previous day. So again, when you're looking at change success score, you're looking at the previous day's score or over a period of time because it's incrementing and decrementing it based on your change activity. The score adjustment for each group is then applied to the latest score for that group, and it's found in the metric table. And a new metric is created reflecting that group's score as of yesterday. And then there's one more final step that happens in the processing, and that is really this automatic execution of a PA job called Change Success Scores for today. And this really collects that data from the metric table so that it can be rendered up in the success score dashboards. Now, the dashboard that Isaac showed you was for Change Success Score. We built something very similar for the Change Model Success. And what's cool, even though we're not going to get into that today, what's cool about that is you can use the breakdowns in PA to look at different categories of changes. So let's say you looked at normal changes in my organization are running about 90% success rate on them. So if I want to look into that in PA, I can look into that normal change, and now I can see, oh, here's one category of changes that are performing well below the other ones and bringing my score down. Then you can start to dial in and look at that and see what's going on with those, potentially even create a different change model for them. So really important capability, and we tried to mimic the data collection and the rendering of those values in a very similar way across Change Success Score and Change Model Success to make it very easy for change teams to be able to administer this. All right, so questions and possible answers. For those of you that don't know me very well, this is my attempt at humor. So questions from anyone that?
Yeah, we've got a few, Greg. So one question that's come up, can the success score calculation be based off of problems with cause code as change?
This feature is for change management only today.
Let's go back here. So we have. All right. Some of these questions we'll need to follow up in text format. So things like product documentation for the success scores and samples of those, how you can do the calculations. So we'll need to follow up on that with our email response.
Yeah, and by the way, for those of you that put questions last time in the chat, I think Isaac and I went back after the session and responded to all of them. So I believe Chris sent that message out along with the recording on modern change.
Yeah.
So if you asked a question and it didn't get answered in the session, please refer back to that. We're going to try to do the same with this. If we don't get to your question in this session, we'll follow up with a response.
For sure. I'm recording everything that happens here, guys. So I won't be dispelling any personal info or identifiable info, but all your questions will be answered. Also, Michael John, I saw your hand was up. Did you want to come off mute? No? Okay.
All right, we do have a question. Michael, I'm going to put the.
Okay, thanks. I couldn't come off mute. So
There you go.
So I posed a question in the Q&A section, and I saw Isaac responded. I was trying to figure out for the P1, P2, P3 incidents that are used for input into the success score, how was that tied back to the change request? Because what I didn't see in the demo is I didn't see a configuration item selected. So just trying to understand that correlation between the incident side and the change side to impact the success score.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's basically what we're looking at is that related list of incidents caused by change on the change form. And that's where we're pulling that data from for incidents caused by change. Now, we've had a number of customers ask us about, some automated way to collect those incidents caused by change. And a few releases back, we released a capability in Innovation Labs using ML to detect those incidents automatically, and then bring them back in a way that would minimize the amount of intervention that a change team would have to do to identify incidents caused by change. And what I mean by that is when the ML prediction came back and said, these are the list of changes that or incidents that may have been caused by this change, we allow the team to decide which ones are, or we can set the precision thresholds with them. That feature has not been released, and we pulled it back out of Innovation Labs because there was so much variation in customer data that the results were inconsistent. We want to come back at that and see if we can automate that so that we can automatically populate that related list for you. But today, the short answer is you need to be able to capture incidents caused by change into that related list to basically render up in this change success score.
Okay, so, and the reason I asked, we've configured or modified our incident form to have a field to denote caused by change, and we use that to as part of our calculation of risk. So I was just trying to figure out if the P1, P2, P3s have a field that can denote it, will success score pull it in automatically, or is there another way we would have to go at it?
Yeah, I for now, I would suggest, you can either modify the way change success score works today and try and pick some of that up, but we don't have an automated way to pull those incidents caused by change into the change related list. We want to get there. So I guess my kind of recommendation here would be, like, if there's something you can do in the short term to address your need, you can probably do that. I do believe at some point in time, in the near future, we're going to address capturing some of that information automatically and pulling it in the change record. So my point of that whole dialogue is really, just be cautious about customizations that you make there, because we very much want to deliver a capability in that space. We're just trying to find the right combination to make sure we have the right degree of accuracy in it.
Okay,
Right.
thanks,
So,
Greg.
yeah, moving on, we have some questions that I want to address, and then we'll get to Bernard and Satish with their hands raised. So are there plans to expand the success scores to something else than assignment group? I think we already touched on that in the chat, but that at the moment is where it is. Greg, do you know if there's anything in the roadmap?
Yeah, I can address that. So we might, we've at least considered the possibility of extending it and potentially even offering a property-based kind of approach to reaching deeper into the assignment groups, like who's doing the change, that kind of thing, with the understanding that there's definitely some HR considerations in there, depending on where you're at around the world or even in your organization. So if we were to extend it to drill down deeper into things like individual levels, we would definitely make that a property driven solution so that customers could opt in or out on it. We would not kind of push that out. Is it going to expand beyond assignment groups? At this point, we don't have any intent to do that. If there's a good use case, I'd certainly love to hear about it, and I could talk with you about it.
All right. Let's see. Go ahead, Bernard. We're going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. And go ahead with your question.
Hi, good morning. So, Greg, that's one of the things you were talking about with the potential additional uses for use case. Our company specifically does have a use case around this, and I think a few others, from what I'm seeing in the chat, have the same or something similar. Our assignment groups are really more like implementation groups. So we have some separation in some areas where developers of our configuration items do not push those changes to production. We really have the assignment group who are the real implementers of that. And with that in mind, the change success score, unfortunately, today does not really provide enough value for us because the implementers are only asked and doing what they're asked to do. So rating their success based on what they're being provided doesn't give us a real clean view of what is the true success issues around these implementations, because those implementation groups could be working on multiple CIs in our environment. It's not just dedicated to one. They could be like 50 or 100 different ones that they may be doing these implementations for, especially like a DBA, let's say like a SQL team, right? Like they're going and doing updates to various databases on various configuration items. So for us, we were hoping in some way, or maybe as an enhancement coming in the future, that this would be rated more around those configuration items specifically. So we can actually gauge the success of those CIs based on the changes that are being done to see, how successful was these last 30 changes that this one CI had, how successful was the last 50 changes that this CI had. And I think that would provide for us a lot, and maybe for other groups here too, a lot more view of the reality of these successful changes in their environments.
Yeah, that excellent use case, Bernard. And let me kind of give you my 2 cents on because we have thought about some of this, we intentionally, at least for right now, and I would love to have a follow-up with you and chat some more about this, but
sure, absolutely.
Here's how we kind of approached it is when we were looking at some of the underlying risk capabilities using ML, and you're probably thinking, why are you talking about risk? I'm talking about success score, but I'll circle back and tie it all out. Is we wanted to incorporate stability of CIs and activity around CIs and bring that in as an input to risk, as opposed to treating it as a success score. So I could be persuaded to kind of think about it differently. So that's why I want to chat with you some more on this. But at least the way we've been thinking about it today is, we want to collect some of that stability information and other details around risk at the CI level, but we wouldn't actually pull that up into the success scores. Right or wrong, that's kind of how we approached it. Could we do it differently in the future? For sure. It's definitely worth chatting about.
Yep, and happy to have that conversation, Greg. So if you need some details from me, I'll provide it.
Awesome.
We'll talk about that in the future.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you. Thanks. That's a good use case, though. I tend to agree. I'm just not sure we're aligned on where it should render, but we can talk about that.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. A couple questions here. I think I'll type that answer out. So Satish, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, guys. This is a question for Greg. I think like when you are showing how to define the risk policy within the tool, is there any option to include the type of change rather than other parameters? Like, because for applications in the cloud, there may be a minor change, but it may be impacting like many other applications. So based on the past successes, based on the incidents, based on the P1, P2, I don't think like that really gives the real risk of the change that we are implementing. The real risk is basically on defining what type of change we are doing, right? So did you guys think about like that in implementing this new risk scoring policy, risk scoring framework? uh, Instead of like going with the past history or the present history, can we not like include into the type of change that we're implementing into the CI, which will define the risk score?
Yeah, excellent question. So the next session, we're going to be covering that in a bit more detail, but if you're at the beginning or towards the beginning of this, I talked about this concept of federated change, where you could basically apply a risk profile differently for different teams in the organization, or even different scenarios or use cases. As part of that, you can very much trigger a specific set of risk evaluations based on the type of change you're doing. Absolutely, that's supported today as of the Tokyo release. You can evaluate those independently based on the type of changes they are. So you could say like normal change where, category is documentation and whatever the case may be, or maybe it's not a normal change, it's some other kind of change. So absolutely, that flexibility is there today as of Tokyo.
All right, Brooke, let's see. I go ahead and ask you to unmute, and we're.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
My question would be, I guess it's kind of a two-parter question. In the beginning, you mentioned how we are able to add additional indicators to this. However, in our instance, we have seen that if you add additional indicators, they don't actually pull into the change success score. Would it be possible for you guys to send out like a demo of you guys creating a brand new indicator that links up to the change success score and how it plays into it? And then I guess the second part of that would be if it's not specifically change related. So let's say we want all incidents. We don't just want those that are change related. We want the teams to be impacted by all incidents. Would that be something like an indicator that we could set up, or no, it has to be change related?
Tosh, you might have to help me out here on this one. I don't think we can pick it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know the answer of like what that would look like if we picked up all incidents. Brooke, like what are you thinking? Like all incidents that happened over a time span? I'm just trying to make sure I understand the use case. Brooke, are you still there?
Oh, all right.
Yeah, sorry, I got muted. Yeah, so I guess for us, we wanted it to be not just specifically change related incidents. We wanted it to be all incidents, so that the teams get impacted by all incidents. So we took off that condition of that change related, and now it no longer plays into our change success scores, and our change success scores are no longer fluctuating.
Okay, well, let's do this, Brooke. Can we contact you afterwards and let's talk through this a little bit more? I just want to make sure I understand that, but I want to circle back to the first part of your question. So can you add indicators? We just did a short write-up on how to do this. We don't have a video for it, but I can share that out with this group of how to add indicators to the success metrics. And we could potentially create a video around it as well, showing how to do that. So I think that's a good ask. So,
Okay.
But the second one, I think I need to follow up a little bit with you just to make sure I'm clear about, how you would look at that and so that we can help with it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Deepak, we're ready for you.
Thanks for that. This is just a clarification for the Q&A I posted in that section. So my question was, can we alter the fabric of the change success score calculation by replacing incidents caused by change with problems caused by change? And the reason I say that is because a lot of time those incidents are resolved by teams which are not the root cause of the problem, or the teams which have made that change. So that probably is a strike against them when they're not even at play there.
You should be able to change the jobs to collect problems caused by change, but I'm trying to think, I'm not sure off the top of my head if I remember, and Lee or Tosh, you can jump in here if you know, but I don't know that we have a related list for problems caused by change. I know we have incidents caused by change and we have problems fixed by the change, but I don't recall seeing a related list out of box for problems.
Maybe it's not out of box, maybe it's just our own shop, but if you have that data.
Yeah, Deepak, if you guys have that data, you can just change your indicators and pick that up. Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
All right, Franco. Franco. Okay. You can unmute yourself if you need to. All right, so we've got a question here, Greg. Do I understand correctly that there is a PA dashboard for change model success scores similar to change success scores?
Correct.
Now do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can hear you.
Sorry for that. Well, thank you. My question is, how much time is being considered for the historical for each indicator? It means maybe at the beginning some team is doing a very bad job implementing changes, but if they improve their performance in the last 3 months or something like that, I want to know if there's some specific time that we are considering to get that metric, in order to maybe at the last 3 months they improve the change success score, but because at the beginning they had a very bad historical, maybe it's something that it's going to affect that kind of evaluation. So my question here is how much time is being considered for the historical for these indicators?
Yeah, it's a good question. So here's how they work. Every team, so think of it very much like a FICO score. Every team starts off with a score of 500. For every successful change they do, the score increments. For every unsuccessful change they do, it decrements. So it's almost like a running score. We have a historical job out there that gets loaded as part of the plugin that you can execute that tells it how far you want to look back when you basically activate change success score. So you can say, I think the out-of-box configuration, I think, is 30 days, if I remember correctly. So what happens is you basically, your score goes up and down and adjusts. So if your team start getting better, you'll see a trajectory on the modal that shows that you're getting better and improving your success scores. The thing we did not add, and we talked about it, but we didn't add it, was the ability to basically reset and zero out the scores again. If there's a number of use cases, we could certainly entertain that idea of doing that. Today, it's not there, but so essentially what you would see is the indicator, you'd see the trajectory moving in a different direction. The team is improving in your example, and their score would improve over time, but there wouldn't be like a zero it out and start over kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Angela, I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more.
I wanted to ask if there were other elements taken into consideration around like compliance, where teams do things that maybe they implemented without approval, or we have undocumented change scenarios where we have some compliance items. We have a compliance tab. Will we be able to pull things like that in to the score as well?
Yes, you should be able to just create another indicator. That's with those success metrics, Angela. You can add the success metrics in there. So, you know, if you wanted to add something like that and adjust the score accordingly, you could do that. One other thing I just want to comment on that, or two things, please. One is we do have an out-of-box unauthorized change capability that it works well. It's not ideal, but it works really well. And that would flag changes that are happening that do not have a change request associated with them, as long as the CIs are part of an application service. That's an important distinction there to be aware of. The second thing when it comes to compliance, and I just want to make sure you're aware of this, today, the current plan, and I mentioned early on with the safe harbor that we weren't going to be talking about any forward-looking things, so this would be the exception of that. So this would fall under that safe harbor disclosure, but we are looking at basically embedding compliance criteria inside the change models so that change teams have better control over what's happening in the life cycle, but more importantly, that the teams, when they fill out a change request, your knowledge workers or consumers of change management, they will get a UI back inside the service operations workspace that says, here are the 5 things that you need to do before you can advance this change to the next state. So we're going to drive compliance back into the models to make it much easier to administer, and also for your knowledge workers to navigate the change process. Did I answer your question, Angela?
We have a question here. So does the starting score for those teams with a 500 that have yet to create a change get calculated into the overall organization's change success score?
I don't believe so. I think we exclude teams that have not done any changes. It may not be as of the Paris release, but I think a subsequent release, we added that on there. Any that Lee or Tosh, do you guys know? Oh, it looks like Lee raised his hand.
Oh yeah, you can unmute yourself, Lee. You're good.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I was answering the question in the chat window. Could you repeat the question one more time, please?
Do teams with a starting score of 500 that have yet to open a change request, are they calculated into the overall company score?
Oh yes, I think it should be. It would be, yeah.
All right.
All the teams that had change requests in the past will be calculated for the change success score, and then in the dashboard, the each team's success score contributing to the average score for the.
Okay, so do they have to have an open change ticket, or rather there are going to be teams, especially new ones, that have no change tickets created? So if that's the case, do they not get included in the calculation if that team has never created a change?
If a team never created a change request in the past, but if they started having a change request, for example, starting from yesterday,
okay,
then the score will be calculated for the team.
Perfect. That's what we needed. All right. All right. So we have we've been going through chat, but we're going to have a follow-up where we're actually going to make sure everybody's questions do get answered that did post to chat. We thank you for that. Thank you very much for the feedback, for the questions, and we will absolutely follow up much like the same with an Excel list with the questions in there and our answers.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to post a link to a survey. Would love for you to fill it out. If you have any thoughts after this call, let us know. We do look at everything, and we really want to capture your voice. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Again, thank you for joining. This is a wonderful call.
Thank you.